One of the things I love about Alan Niven, of many things, in addition to just being a visionary leader in our community, but he's an economist who's a business guy who's fun to listen to. I swear, most of the economists I listen to look like they took a bath in vinegar. It's like, well, the economy's up, but it's like, okay, tell your face, this is good news, tell your face about it. Well, with Alan Niven, that doesn't have to happen because he just does it by nature of just who he is. Plus, he has a wonderful book called The Great Divide that if you haven't read that book yet, you want to get a copy of that because it really talks about where our country, what part of our countries are going to continue to do well, are doing well and continue to do well, and which one of them just, frankly, aren't coming back. So, without further ado, wonderful, esteemed economist and demographer, Alan Niven. Alan. Thank you. Okay. Where's your clicker?
Excellent. I love what Greg does because it doesn't cost you anything except maybe a minor fee to Greg. I love Section 179. I was telling him last month my accountant called me up to have our annual meeting on what I'm going to do for my taxes for 2018, and he informed me that I had to go out and buy a new BMW X5. And that's because under Section 179, you can expense in entirety a vehicle that weighs over 6,000 pounds. And there are 5 sedans that do that, and the X5 is one of them. It's out there in the parking lot. And, but I can deduct the higher amount from my 2018 return. So,
Alan's giving rides after lunch.
Right. It doesn't fit in the garage, but other than that. First, I want to let you know that there's absolutely no correlation between who's president and what the economy does. They're completely unrelated. I can take you through history and show you how some of our most beloved presidents had the most horrible economies. So don't pay any attention to Washington. Basically, there are 3 things that make the world go round. Number 1 is oil, and oil has nothing to do with supply and demand. It's a game. It's a game that the Saudis and the Russians and the Americans play. And that's why the price of our oil goes up and down. Nothing to do with supply and demand. So oil's a big part of the world economy. Interest rates, another game. They go up, they go down. And typically what we've shown from a real estate standpoint is until they hit 6% interest rates, 30-year fixed, you don't get that much of an effect on real estate sales. And now, right now, we're doing, it's really very interesting because the Feds keep pushing the rates up, but long-term rates are going down. And you can still get a 30-year conforming fixed-rate mortgage on a house for under 5. And if you're in the big league, the insurance companies are charging even less than that. So money's plentiful. They are making more of it, and the rates are reasonable. But the big thing is demographics, because demographics really rule the world from the standpoint that how you grow demographically depends on whether or not your country or your state, for that matter, prospers or dies. The magic number is 2. What that number says is that for every mom and dad, there have to be 2 kids. If you don't have 2 kids, your economy begins to shrink. Japan has 125 million people. In the next 30 years, they are going to shrink to 95 million. They're going to lose 30 million people because they stopped having kids basically in World War II. and they're not getting household formations. If you don't get the household formations, your economy dies. I will tell you, Korea's in the same shape, Russia's in the same shape. Fortunately, we're at exactly 2.0 in the United States. And when you look out to 2050, you see that there are really only two countries that are really going to do really well. One is the United States and the other is India. But when you look at Europe and Japan and Korea, they're in a big hurt. And now we already start seeing, and you've been reading, China's not doing so well. It's not doing so well because 30 years ago they put in a one-child policy, and lo and behold, it turned out genetically they wound up with 1.4 males for every 1.0 female. So now they have several hundred million millennial males who have nobody to get married to. And their household formations have slowed down dramatically, and therefore everything that relates to household formations, the sales of housing, furniture, cars, has slowed down. And their economy is in a world of hurt, and it's going to take them 30 years. They've done away with the one-child policy, but it's going to take them 30 years to get back to where they should be. So China, they've still got 1.3 billion people, but the reality is that they are hurting, and they will continue to hurt because of that. So let me turn to the United States and talk about its growth, because the gold states, the 15 gold states, are really where the action is, and I call the Trump states not going to do so well. He's talking about bringing back manufacturing to the Midwest. He forgot to talk to GM, Ford, and Harley Davidson. Ain't going to happen. Last year, we added a large number of manufacturing jobs in the United States. 3% of them were in Michigan. So the reality is you have to look at this map and take a look at where the United States has been, is going. What I'm showing you is basically 30, 40-year trends. Whoop. Right? Where'd it go? Okay. In 2017 and 15 and 14, et cetera, half of the growth, the entire population gain in the United States was in California, Texas, and in Florida. That's pretty, there are 50 states. But these three, it's really where the action is. And we look at the job additions, and it's pretty much the same thing. Now, Texas will continue to beat us in jobs every time. They're a non-union state, and employers love non-union states. But we here in California aren't doing so bad either. There's 300,000 jobs. It's a lot of jobs. And we continue on that growth path. Florida, somewhat less because they have been completely unable to attract the high-tech jobs and the software jobs that are driving California in particular, but also Texas. And Texas is once again going through an enormous oil boom of fracking. Their domestic product in the state is absolutely exploding. They are rolling in money. Can't quite see this, but what it tells you is that when you look year over year, the gold states had about 65% of all the new jobs created, and the Trump states had about 14%. They're not, they're dying, but the reality is that the big three had 40% of all the jobs, and that's not changing. It really isn't. It's a long-term trend. And the reason is that in 1980, it's not ancient history, I mean, we're talking, 30, 40 years ago, 50% of all jobs were factory and routine clerical. 25 years ago, all us guys had secretaries. Nobody has secretaries anymore. 25 years ago, if someone would have asked me to type a letter, I'd say, are you crazy? You know, that's my secretary's job. Now everybody types. But the reality is that we only have 15% of all our jobs that are factory and routine clerical. And unfortunately, the biggest part of the factory and routine clerical jobs were in the black states, not in the gold states. So McKinsey and Company last year came out with a study, and they basically divided all jobs into two categories, algorithmic and heuristic. Algorithmic jobs are jobs where you do the same thing every day. Cashiers, bus drivers, no thought process. Heuristic jobs are the jobs where you think every day. I suspect you are all in that category. I hope you're all in that category. But the reality is, when you look at the states that are growing, the vast majority of their basic jobs are heuristic. And California, far and away, is the leader in heuristic jobs. Because when you start in the Bay Area and work your way down to San Diego, we're just loaded with heuristic jobs, and we continue to increase. Yes, our housing is expensive, but every single market that has the great heuristic jobs also has expensive housing. Washington, New York, Boston, Seattle, San Francisco, Orange County, and us. And it's unfortunate, but it's not going to change. We here in San Diego County are very blessed. Most metropolitan areas have two economic drivers. An economic driver is an industry whose source of revenue is from outside the area. So Michigan, obviously, automobiles were their economic driver. We have 9 in this county, which makes us not quite recession-proof, but pretty much so. And of course, the big dog is still defense. We have, it's about 25% of our economy is still defense, and the enormous number of contracts that go out from the Department of Defense. Our manufacturing is doing very well. Leisure and hospitality, not really a heuristic industry, but we are doing incredibly well. Our leisure and hospitality industry is absolutely booming. We're one of the top 5 metropolitan areas in America in terms of hotel occupancy. Our hotels, in the hotel business, nationally, about 65% occupancy is considered good. We run at 80% every single year, and during the convention months, close to 100. It's pretty remarkable. One of the things I like to talk about in leisure and hospitality is our cruise ship business. In 2007, we had 1 million cruise ship passengers get aboard a ship here. They almost all went down to Mexico. And that's when Mexico had their massive drug problem and abnormal number of killings. We went from 1 million cruise ship passengers down to 200,000. Carnival picked up all their ships, not quite literally. They sailed them over to Australia and went after the Far East market and did brilliantly well. Only now are we starting to resuscitate. In 2016, we were at 200,000. This year, I think we'll probably get 300,000. Disney's here now with ships. So we're bringing that back. But that is an enormous economic generator, because every time a ship leaves, they've got to buy the food here and the drinks and everything that goes with it. And then in addition to that, the average cruise ship passenger stays 2 days in a hotel here and then goes to the zoo and SeaWorld. And so the reality is it's an amazing industry, and it is basically recession-proof. It's not Mexican drug-proof, but it is recession-proof, and it's coming back. So our industry, and we're building, we've got another 5,000 hotel rooms we're building now, so it's going very well. So basic point is we're in pretty good shape. We will continue to grow by about 30,000 people a year. You say, 30, that's 300,000 a decade. We have 3.3 million people right now, and most of that growth is natural household formation. More people being born here than dying. It's not the result of in-migration. And the only thing that we're missing as an economy is more entry-level labor. And we desperately need to open up the gates to Mexico. That's a political statement, you'll gather. The reality is that in order for our economy to keep moving, we need those people coming here to do entry-level labor, because go ask anybody in construction now, they're desperate for labor. Just think in terms of the entry level that we need on a day-to-day basis. As our country ages, as our state ages, we need those people to work in our senior facilities. We need them to be our gardeners, our housekeepers. So we desperately need to reopen the gates and let in literally several 100,000 a year. Now remember, we've got 325 million people in this country. So when I say let in 300,000, it's an insignificant number, but the reality is it's desperately needed. And historically, that has allowed California and Arizona and Nevada and Texas to grow. Because if we don't have them, we're going to be in a difficult situation. Plus the fact the in-migrating population tends to have more kids than the native population. And for us to maintain that magic 2 number, we have to bring in a lot of people who are going to have 3 kids instead of 1.5 like we gringos do. So it's really important that we have that immigration. Now, when we look at population shift, when we look at the big 5 with the greatest inflow intentions, Redfin looked at 1 million viewers who live in one place but were looking at homes in another place. So you look at Los Angeles, and the destination that they want is San Diego. So you have 10 million people in LA County, and they're all going to move here eventually. So I'm not too worried about our growth. We are also the 2nd safest metropolitan area in the United States. And the people who visit us know that. For some reason, El Paso is number 1. I don't understand that. But yeah, we're amazingly safe. Yeah, there's no doubt. And when you compare it to Detroit or St. Louis or Memphis or Baltimore, it's just, there is no comparison. So, you know, if we are a safe place. Now, that's Barbie doll. She's no longer a millennial. She's 50 years old this year. And when you look at what drives an economy, it's the millennials. We, in San Diego, are the number 1 millennial metropolitan area in the United States. We have the highest percentage of people 18 to age 34. And that will go on the next 30 years like that. And that is what's going to drive this economy, because those people are going to form households and cause our economy to keep swinging. Now, right now, 38% of millennials live with their parents. And it's not because they love their parents most. Okay, they just can't afford to get out of the house. Where they love their parents least are states where the housing prices are really cheap, and about half as many kids live with their parents. But this 38% of the Californians who live with their parents, this coming decade is their decade, because they're going to be moving out. They're going to team up. It'll be a husband-wife. We average 1.6 jobs per household. So the incomes will be sufficient for them to buy homes, buy cars. One of the facts I like to talk about, I look at about a dozen indexes of economics, the usual stuff, unemployment and job claims and that. The one that they don't publish every day is car sales. We have had 5 years in a row of selling 17 million new cars. Never have we come close to that in U.S. history. The other part of it is that 10 years ago, the average car price was $22,000. Last year was $37,000 because 70% of them were SUVs and pickup trucks. I don't know how many of you went to the car show this year. You couldn't find a sedan. You saw Chevy Tahoes for $90,000. It's amazing. And the reason is the millennials, because they need SUVs to put their $600 strollers in. And that's what they're doing. So, you know, the car business is great, and the only thing we in this county are short of is housing. You can calculate it out. We're short about 100,000 housing units. How do we know that? Because we know that every day 66,000 people commute from Murrieta and Temecula down here on the 15. And if you've ever been on that chunk of highway in the morning, it's not fun. You have 20-some thousand that commute every day from Tijuana. Sometimes have to wait 2 hours to get across that damn border, and including, by the way, a lot of American citizens who come across and hop the trolley and come up to downtown or Mission Valley. So, and then you have the high percentage of millennials living at homes. We said we really can calculate a real live shortage. Can we correct the shortage? Probably not, but we can do better. We can do a lot better. Unfortunately, as Scott Sherman mentioned, our city council has 2 of 9 who've ever been in business. And one is far left, and then there's Scott a little bit to the right. But the reality is they won't vote for densification, and that's what we need. They won't vote for densification because their constituencies don't want it. Lori Zapf lost her seat at the city council because she was in favor of building a 5-story skyscraper at Claremont Drive and Marina Boulevard. And the neighbors came out, and she was a very good council person. She lost. So now the city council is about to have their salary doubled. The last time we voted, there was a little clause in one of those things that we voted for that said the city council is going to be paid 2/3 of what a Superior Court judge earns. It's about $150 a year. Right now they're earning $80. They will kill to get reelected. And the only way they think they can get reelected is if they vote against densification. So anything over 3 stories, they're going to fight like crazy. So it will become increasingly difficult to provide housing. So what happens? You wind up with terrific growth in Otay Ranch. Unfortunately, all the jobs are up north. So you wind up spending an hour and a half going north in the morning to the job. So it's not a happy scene. It's not going to change a lot. It'll continually be a housing shortage. But the reality is, we'll muddle through. And we'll continue to grow and prosper. And as a final note, I'm a perpetual optimist. But I've got reason for it. In the next quarter century, I won't be around, I don't think, but the millennials are going to inherit $40 trillion. 80% of seniors own their own home, and they own them almost all free and clear. If you were to go online to Metropolitan Life's website and take a look at their payouts, what's happening now as the senior population starts to fade, there is an enormous amount of money coming down the pike. And you will see it, you can see it every day in the sale of upscale items like Mercedes, Lexus, Beamers. You can see it in the upgrading of what millennials buy. So I will tell you that, yes, we will have recessions, because you always do. But when you look at the big pictures and the big numbers, the next quarter century is going to be an amazing time here in America. Mr. Kelly? Thank you, my friend.
Well,